Welcome, folks, to the Exposed Vet Radio Show. The Exposed Vet Radio Show is brought to you by Exposed Vet Productions. It's now a production show instead of a radio show, and in cooperation with Valor for Vet. My co-host today is Mr. Ray Cobb. I'm looking at him right here. How you doing, Ray?
I'm doing great. How are you this evening?
I'm doing really well for a guy that has no teeth and still talk, right? But
There you
today we
go.
got a treat. We've got Valor for Vet's Bethanie Spangenberg, and this is an education only show, guys. If you want to, if you want to get a good education of how the VA works and how they do, you need to listen to this show and others like it. This show will be posted upon YouTube and some other places, probably by tomorrow. But I want to introduce everybody to Bethany Spangenberg. She is the owner of a company called Valor for Vet, and that's valorforvet.com. And she is a physician's assistant, and she uh, does independent medical opinions for veterans seeking their disability. And without further ado, Bethany, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for this new production and see how things go. And you sound great for not having any teeth.
Yeah, well, all I want for Christmas, and it didn't work out, I guess. No. But I've got temporary somewhere, but I talk better without them than I can with them. At least I don't whistle as much, right? Mm. But we're going to talk about neuro. We started this on a couple of shows ago. Last month, we discussed some of the neurological issue. Of course, there's some proposed changes in the mix. And then the election happened, and everything got turned up on its head. So we don't know what's going to happen now. But we're gonna basically go off on what we've got, and that's the Title 38, Part 4. And we're going to discuss the DBQ for neurological conditions, and we're going to focus on things like ALS today. Is that right, Bethany?
That's right.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, you go ahead and take off, young lady.
So this kind of what prompted this particular show and maybe the next year of our show is the VA had proposed changes to the neurologic conditions, and the time frame for comment was getting ready to close. And I felt that it was important that we had a discussion about, you know, Valor for Vet as a company, me as a physician assistant and an accredited agent, kind of putting comment out there to voice our concerns with what was being proposed, because a lot of the changes that they were proposing weren't, in my opinion, they were not going to benefit the veteran. They were going to hurt the veteran, and I felt that it was important to comment on that. And after the show that we had, which is if they want to listen to it, we've got it up on Audible and Spotify and on our website. But after that show, I sat down and I wrote a 12-page letter to the VA outlining the things that I was concerned with. And in order to continue the discussion, I wanted to continue with neurologic conditions. And the VA has like 11 DBQs for neurologic conditions, and I just felt it appropriate to start at the top and work the way down our way down the list. Um, for ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, the DBQ itself is 12 pages. We're not going to go through every question and break it down because it is very comprehensive. But the key takeaway for this particular show is that this DBQ sets the stage for veterans who have significant diseases and that may need or meet additional benefits such as special monthly compensation, such as housebound or aid in attendance. And that's primarily going to be the emphasis as we go through this DBQ. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I'm going to post, the full response from like the 12-page response. I'm going to post it somewhere. It's not going to be ideal to read it here. Nobody wants to, you guys won't have to wake you up. But I do want to take a second and preface today's show with one of the sections that I talked about in my letter. All right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So on page 10 of the 12 pages, the section is DBQ structure. And let me jump to the front here because I want it to be clear that the VA is proposing these changes because they want to their goal is to provide clear evaluation criteria, improve rating quality and consistency, and ensure the evaluations are accurate. And I don't think that their theme or purpose was really clear in their proposed changes. And so part of my feedback is that. So this section talks about DBQ structure, ensuring consistency across neurologic motor conditions, such as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. So word for word. For my final recommendation, I would like to discuss the structure of disability benefits questionnaires. When comparing DBQs for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or ALS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, and other neurologic motor conditions, it becomes clear that there are significant discrepancies in their design, despite these conditions often leading to substantial dependence as the disease progresses. Given that these conditions can result in the need for aid and attendance with activities of daily living, housebound status, or even bedridden care, it is concerning that DBQs for neurologic motor conditions like Parkinson's disease do not include the same comprehensive section as those for ALS or multiple sclerosis. For example, the ALS DBQ includes specific sections for documenting housebound status, aid and attendance, higher level aid and attendance, the use of assistive devices, and the remaining effective function of the extremities. These sections provide information that helps identify a veteran's need for higher levels of care and entitlement to special monthly compensation. In contrast, the Parkinson's disease DBQ lacks these important sections, creating a significant gap in assessing the veteran's true level of disability and care needs. While proposing changes to the DBQ structure may extend beyond the scope of the current rule changes, this discrepancy highlights the need for broader revisions to meet the purpose of the proposed rule changes. Aligning the structure of DBQs for neurologic motor conditions such as Parkinson's disease with those for ALS and MS would provide a more accurate, consistent, and clear framework for evaluating veterans' conditions. And so, again, all over that proposed rule change, we saw, them beat the words for accuracy, consistency, and yada, yada, yada. But I think if that's truly their goal, we need to have a deeper discussion what these DBQs entail. So I just wanted to let you guys, that's part of what I came up with from our last discussion. So thank you. I know the whole letter's lengthy, so it can be a lot. But any questions about the letter or that section?
Just make a comment about it. I mean, ALS is probably the only disability in the VA system that anybody who served and comes down with ALS, I guess, I don't think there's a time period that actually will be service connected for it. That's a disability to where you're going to get the maximum of R2 one day. And that's the only good thing about it, because when you get your R2, you won't have it long.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So,
Unfortunately.
yeah.
So when we look at ALS, it's amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. A lot of people reference it as Lou Gehrig's disease. Lou Gehrig was a baseball player in the 1920s, I believe. And he developed the disease, and that's where the awareness really spread. And so that's how it kind of, Lou Gehrig's disease becomes synonymous with ALS. But what happens with that disease is there are some dysfunction of the proteins with the brain and the spinal cord, and it shuts down the communication of the nerves from the brain to the body. What's sad about ALS is that the individual that develops the disease, they stay cognitively intact, meaning they're aware of the changes. They're aware that they're losing feeling in their feet or losing strength in their feet. They're aware that they're struggling to swallow or struggling to breathe. And so they actually start to suffocate in their own bodies, and they're fully aware of what's happening, because the disease, as it progresses, it causes respiratory failure. It causes the lungs to stop moving and functioning like they're supposed to. So that's what's really impactful about ALS, is because it's really emotionally and physically devastating for the individual that develops it. So there is no cure. Um, there is some medications to kind of delay the progression of the disease, but typically these patients will die between 2 and 5 years after diagnosis. So their life expectancy is pretty short or
Unless you're
limited
Stephen
after
Hawking.
diagnosis.
Unless you're Stephen Hawking.
Oh, did he have ALS or did he have something? He had something else, I
You had
think.
ALS. You had ALS. You sure
Well,
did.
maybe I was gonna say maybe his brain he came up with something because they're actually, what's interesting is every time we have a show, there's something that comes up beforehand that kind of prefaces the show without me even trying to. So I was reading a book on mitochondrial function, and it's a medical book, and it has to do with how medicine is actually transitioning to the cellular level rather than looking at just the like body, like individual systems. So instead of looking at the cardiovascular system by itself and just like the endocrine system by itself, they're really starting to look down at the cellular level and realizing that these systems truly are integrated and they function together. But in that book, it was talking about ALS and how the problem is the proteins within the brain. So we have all these proteins that communicate and tell our body what to do. And part of the problem with the protein is that it's folded. And they have actually shown that sauna, if you go in the sauna on a regular basis, that the sauna will help to unfold that protein that is um, that is incorrectly folded. It will unfold it and correctly fold it back. So I don't know if Stephen Hawking tapped into, some of that cellular level brilliance that he has. I don't think he advocated for the sauna, but it sounds like that we're really trying to look a little bit deeper at some of these conditions. So who knows? Anyways, that
See the
was
claims. I can see the claims filed tomorrow. We need a sauna.
right, right. It's out there. So that's actually, yeah, I'm starting to advocate for that because I'll get my husband one and
Can't
I'll,
give you a sauna. How about a shoehorn?
I'll yeah. Hey, I'm not going to make any political comments right now. $2 million to what country for what surgeries? I don't know. Anyways, um, all right, ALS. Any questions so far about what we talked about?
That's pretty much cut and dry. But I like the studies on on cells because your body's nothing but cells. I think if they can figure that out, they can maybe cure a lot of stuff. They can
Yeah,
cure the
no, I
cells, they can
agree.
cure the disease. Diabetes is one of them. Cure it. Hurry up.
Yeah.
We all three would like that.
That's true. Are we all three on insulin pumps?
No, I
I
don't
think
think
so.
Ray is.
Am I not on
Oh,
here?
okay. Not
Yeah,
yet.
you're on there, Ray.
I'm not. You're on there. I'm talking about an insulin pump.
Insulin pump. You're still taking the shots, ain't you, Ray?
Oh, you're
I
muted.
think you muted. Yeah, you muted, Ray. Oh, he's still taking shots, I'm pretty sure of it, because I think Pam has to give them to him because it's the situation.
Can
But
you hear me now? I
yeah,
lost. Okay, I lost you for a while there. Okay, don't know
okay.
why, but
Now you're still taking shots, right?
yeah, yeah. I take 4 shots a day,
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. So
and
I
I'm
don't
on the
know.
U500, which is extremely, um, powerful. It's 5 times stronger than R.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
has some interesting for me. It's pretty interesting. Um, Even though I'm on U500 taking 65 units,
Hmm.
my blood sugar will go on any given day. Very seldom comes under 170, and most of the time stays around the 200 to 225 level. And they don't
Wow.
want to get, they're scared to give me any higher dose. So
Mm.
what do? Body's so insulin
Frustrating.
resistant, is what they tell me.
You would probably
So
benefit for a pump, but I don't know if that's something you want to tackle, but I don't
you
know.
would, with your situation or levels, you'd have to get a high dose pump because I don't think I think you'd go through 150 in a hurry.
Yeah, I would. How are
Are
you
you talking
liking yours
about
so far, John?
No, I like it, love it. I love it to death. I mean, it's it doesn't let diabetes control your life like, the stopping and pulling the needle out and doing this and that. Sitting in the car waiting before you go eat, give yourself a shot and then embarrassment and things like that. So it's pretty good for the psyche. And only thing that hurts is when that automatic cannula gets inserted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So I'm going to kind
Pretty
of go on to the next section here. For ALS is presumptive. You have to have 90 days of active duty. And with that diagnosis, you actually get a priority processing through the VA. So they try to get you through the system pretty quick and you jump the line there. What's also interesting about ALS and why it's presumptive is that the medical studies that have come out funded by the VA has shown that veterans are twice as likely than the general population to develop ALS. So they don't know exactly why people develop ALS, but they're trying to correlate, the difference between the general population and what veterans are exposed to. So they believe there's some type of toxin in the military during, their time that is causing these folded proteins to develop into ALS. Um, Specifically, I have the medical article says risk factors include environmental exposure such as toxins and physical stress associated with military service. So that's kind of how that came about for it to be presumptive for all veterans that have served 90 days or more. Uh, before I get a
test
little
that.
bit,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I said that to myself.
Oh, okay. I got medical notes here. Typically with ALS is the individual will develop symptoms and they really have to go through a workup of exclusion. So they're going to have MRIs, they're going to have nerve studies, they're going to have all kinds of testing done before they finally get down to the ALS diagnosis. So from the time of symptom onset until you actually get a diagnosis could be a few years. Sometimes there's another condition that is very similar to ALS. It's called PLS, and it's primary lateral sclerosis. I believe, don't quote me on that, but I believe it's primary lateral sclerosis. The only difference between the two is that PLS actually develops at a slower progression. Right now, the VA rates PLS and ALS the same. In the proposed changes, they were looking at significantly reducing the PLS compensation and my understanding is that they were going to give it its own rating schedule. In fact, I have it in front of me. They were going to give it its own rating. Um, I'm not going to get to it fast enough, but I believe it was like 10%. So, and then you would compound all the other limitations as a separate disability percentage. So where ALS gets 100% automatically presumptive, PLS is not presumptive. It is not, they're trying to change it to where it's not 100%. So again, in the long run, the diseases end the same. Maybe PLS has a little bit of life extension in comparison to ALS, but the disease progression itself is very similar, just one's quicker than the other. So I was disappointed to see that. And I know when I looked through the comments for the proposed changes, there was like 10 or 11 plus neurologists or specialists that commented on that. They're like, no, this is terrible for these veterans. You can't, the need and the disease progression is terrible. Like you shouldn't be doing that. So we'll see what it's up.
That guy needs to be unemployed.
Yeah. um, ALS can lead to several secondary health issues, including respiratory failure. That's because what I talked about. Malnutrition because they can't swallow, so they have troubles with consuming food towards the end as the disease progresses. Pneumonia because with the swallowing they can aspirate and get some of that food down into their lungs and then develop bacteria. And then one primary or predominant secondary condition is those mental health conditions that I talked about, because the person's trapped in their body. So it's sad. But those are the medical notes that I have before we dive into this DBQ. Anything you guys want to?
Diaphragmatic paralysis. I know all about that. So if you lose both of them, you're in trouble.
Yeah. All right, let's jump right into the DBQ. Like I said before, it's 12 pages. I'm not going to go through each section. I just want to kind of lay out the format for each section here. So as we start off with all DBQs, it's the veteran's information, the relationship the examiner has to the veteran, and the health, did I say that right? The medical examiner's relationship to the veteran and the role that the medical examiner plays to that veteran, such as being their provider if they're seen in the clinic. The next section is evidence review. That's standard in all the DBQs. Often for this one, the veteran is going to submit their medical records. And like I said previously, that workup is going to be extensive for the medical examiner. And that has a lot of value when they go to complete these disability exams. Section 1 is the diagnosis. Section 2 is the medical history. Section 3, first question. Does the veteran report any muscle weakness in the upper and or lower extremities attributable to ALS? Primary symptoms when they first start is going to be weakness in the upper or lower extremities. This is a question that also prompts loss of use for SMC. Okay. The notes to the rater for ALS tells them that they need to consider SMC for ALS patients. The Federal Register does not prompt the rater to consider SMC for any other comparable neurologic condition like Parkinson's disease. Does not prompt them for SMC, which I find disappointing. Next question is, does the veteran have any pharynx or larynx or swallowing conditions attributable to ALS, which we talked about, the difficulty swallowing, which can cause them to develop pneumonia or malnutrition. That typically develops later in the disease. It's not one of the primary symptoms that arises. That's as the disease progresses that the individual may develop those difficulties. Question 3C on page 3 says, does the veteran report any respiratory conditions attributable to ALS? The very next question, which I find interesting, is, does the veteran report signs or symptoms of sleep apnea or sleep apnea-like conditions attributable to ALS? That is a secondary condition that they're specifically asking about for ALS. Why aren't they doing it for the other conditions? And the next question here talks about complete or partial loss of sphincter control as it relates to stool in the bowels. That is a special monthly compensation question. They're prompting SMC in this question. Question 3F, 3G, question 3I, and question 3J all prompt special monthly compensation as it relates to the bladder and bowel. They don't do that for the other ones. Any questions so far?
No, there's a lot of carryover on those SMCs. How strong or how likely, which you may not know the answer to this, is a veteran given an SMC, for example, an R1 or even standard aid in attendance, based on what they're recommending there or what they're referring to there under their special monthly compensation. does it help the veteran, or is it like it is with some of the other, like diabetes, where they've got to go and prove it and fight for it, and takes a while to get it?
So that's why I feel that it should be different because this DBQ is laying it out for the veteran to get their maximum rating. And it does not do the same for diabetes or other medical conditions. And I have not had direct experience with ALS specifically, but I have seen claims for like former prisoner of war. I used to be certified in those exams. They do whatever they can to get that FPOW at the max rating percentage that they can. That is what tone is set for this ALS DBQ, is they are trying to capture everything they possibly can to support this veteran that has developed ALS, which I appreciate. But why aren't we doing it for the other conditions? Why aren't we doing it for our other
Actually,
veterans?
actually, this is on the VA, basically on them because the court has, and we're talking the federal, not the Veterans Court, but the one above it, has said, I forget the case right now, but it has said that it is the VA's responsibility to maximize the benefit for the veteran depending on circumstances.
Yes,
So that could be an
that's for
argument.
every veteran.
Yes.
Um,
So they're not playing ball with the court. They're just doing what they can do. So it's
So if we move along this DBQ here, one I forgot to mention that also does SMC for urine, for bladder and bowel is 3L. I mean, we have 2.5 pages just focusing on, hey, what SMC does this veteran qualify for? The other thing that is interesting with ALS is in the M21, I believe it's M21, but I know that there are standard periodic assessments that the veteran has for ALS because of the progression of the disease. If they do an exam, the very next exam is already timed out. It's already scheduled because they know that that veteran's disease is going to progress. So they're doing what they can to capture those benefits in a timely fashion, which they don't do for other
and you
veterans.
know you when you first started the DBQ, it started asking about extremities and loss of balance and gait and things like that. If your first symptoms and first signs are loss of use of your hands and your feet, you'd automatically go to R2. So any other SMC that they talk about or give you is a moot point because once you get to R2, you're not going no higher.
Right, that's true.
Mhm.
We're going to jump to page 6. Page 6, top question is, does the veteran report erectile dysfunction or female sexual arousal disorder attributable to ALS? So again, prompting SMC. Section 4 jumps into the neurologic exam. For these exams, they are going to be pretty comprehensive. The examiner is going to document the speech, the cognition, their gait, how they walk, strength of the upper and lower extremities, the reflexes in the upper and lower extremities. They're going to want to have the examiner look at muscle tone and atrophy, um, and then document the severity of the muscle conditions. Section 5 is just an open section about the other physical findings that were not previously discussed. Section 6 says mental health manifestations due to ALS or its treatment. Does the veteran have depression, cognitive impairment, or dementia, or any other mental disorder attributable to ALS? They are prompting the examiner to trigger a possible secondary condition that has developed. They don't do that in the other DBQs. Section 7 is specifically dedicated to housebound status. Due to ALS, is the veteran substantially confined to his or her dwelling in the immediate premises, or if institutionalized to the ward, are they confined to the ward or the clinical area? So they are prompting the benefit for housebound status. If we go on to page 9, section 8 has questions dedicated specifically for aid and attendance. I'm going to read through these questions because I think veterans that are also seeking, may not have ALS, but they're also seeking aid and attendance. I think they need to be aware of what questions may be asked or what the expectation is if you're seeking that benefit. So question 8A, is the veteran able to dress or undress him or herself without assistance? 8B, does the veteran have sufficient upper extremity coordination and strength to be able to feed him or herself without assistance? 8C, is the veteran able to attend to the wants of nature, such as toileting, without assistance? 8D, is the veteran able to bathe him or herself without assistance? 8E, is the veteran able to keep him or herself ordinarily clean and presentable without assistance? 8F, does the veteran need frequent assistance for adjustment of any special prosthetic or orthopedic appliance? So those questions, if you're ever applying for aid and attendance, those are the types of questions that you should expect to hear and have an answer for so you can express your need. Any questions for that?
I think that would automatically qualify for the caregiver program too. Somebody's going to work, stay with them at home and work with
Well,
them.
yeah, I mean, what she just said, if the answer to those daily activities, as it stands today, I know that's going to be changing and going into effect next October, some changes there as well. But right now, one of those, if you're pre 9/11, is going to get you aid and attendance level 1, which is over $1,500 for your spouse. And it goes to her into whatever account she chooses to go for. And if you have 3 of those, if you're pre 9/11 and only need 2, if you're post 9/11, that's going to put you up to level 2 in the caregiver. And that's going to give you an additional $3,004. And that is based on, an E4 in your area. So it could be higher in some areas and lower in others. But that sounds to me like they have is going to be an additional funds that a spouse will be able to receive on top of the because of the ALS and what it does. It seems like it would just be automatic for the caregiver program.
Should be. Because there's no way a spouse can work and take care of an ALS patient.
Well, that's pretty obvious if listening to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my son's teachers, he died from it, or her husband died from it. She had to take off like 3 years to stay with him.
Well, that was another
Uh,
thing too that comes into play there when you have those conditions. You cannot be left alone.
mhm. The aid and attendance section actually has 2 other questions to it that I didn't read.
Okay.
It mainly has to do with bedridden, the veteran being bedridden. So it asks if they're bedridden or not. And they always define this, which I find their definition interesting. It says for VA purposes, being bedridden will be that the condition which actually requires that the claimant remain in bed. The fact that the claimant has voluntarily taken to bed or that a physician has prescribed rest in bed for the greater or lesser part of the day to promote convalescence or cure will not suffice. So I don't understand their definition of being required if the physician is prescribing the bed rest. So I don't know.
It's a condition puts you in the bed and you can't get out. Basically, that's what bedridden status. ALS would be one if you can't move your extremities or your arms and you can't ambulate or move around, you got to stay in bed. I
Well,
guess that
So
also
would be
mainly,
yeah.
there's a couple I've seen with it, and actually when they got them up in a wheelchair, they actually had to take a sheet or a large towel and tie under their arms and in the back of the chair to keep them sitting up or from slumping over.
yeah.
And that's usually pretty close to the final days.
Unfortunately. I just find it interesting that they don't say that, like, hey, like if the doctor tells you that you're required to be in bed, that doesn't count. It has to be like you're involuntary bedridden. And just use the word involuntary. I don't understand. Anyways, um, this is where the caregiver is prompted in this section. Does the veteran require care and or assistance on a regular basis due to his or her physical and or mental disabilities in order to protect him or herself from the hazards and or dangers in his or her daily environment? So that's when you said they can't be left alone. That's where they're prompting that question. So the next section, section 9, is specifically dedicated to the need for higher level, a more skilled aid in attendance. So they're saying that for VA purposes, this skilled higher level of care includes, but is not limited to, healthcare services such as physical therapy, administration of injections, placement of indwelling catheters, changing of sterile dressings, and or like functions which require professional healthcare training or the greater supervision of a trained healthcare professional to perform. In the absence of this higher level of care provided in the home, the veteran would require hospitalization, nursing home care, or other residential institutional care. I don't know of another DBQ that prompts this next step for aid and attendance, the higher level. Section 10 talks about assistive devices. That's pretty standard in all the DBQs. Section 11 is prompting loss of use. And they have added a better understanding of what that means to the clinician. So one thing I didn't mention about their proposal to the neurologic changes is they wanted to remove from the Federal Register the definitions of what the functions were for the muscles, like where they what they call innervate. So like internal rotation of the shoulder, external rotation, like range of motion. So the Federal Register defines that. Well, in their proposed changes, they said that the examiners already know what those functions are. We don't need to have them defined in the Federal Register. I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. We should not be removing any resources that are there to help the medical examiner. Those resources are valuable to those examiners because they're not legally trained individuals. So that actually helps to provide that consistency that they say that they're trying to instill. So part of the emphasis I'm putting on the need for education of the medical examiner, or the need to really define these things, is this section right here. So they, in the past, have not had the definition of what it means to have no effective function remaining other than that would be served as an amputation with a prosthesis. That is a very common question that gets asked because they try to define loss of use, saying if we would chop the veteran's leg off and give him a prosthetic, would he have been better off? And honestly, when I would do the DBQs back at the VA, that's what I would ask. I would say, okay, so we're looking at your ankle today. If I would cut your ankle off and I gave you a fake one, would you be better off today? And I would listen to their response and mark, based off their response. And so the understanding of that question was not provided to me in any type of clinician training or any type of um, handbook. And so it was a really vague question for an examiner to be asking if you don't have any context of why that question is there, what it really means. So I see that they have added additional information regarding that, and I think it's valuable that I read that out here. For remaining effective function of the extremities, looking at loss of use, it says the intention of this section is to permit the examiner to quantify the level of remaining function. It is not intended to inquire whether the veteran should undergo an amputation with fitting of a prosthesis. For example, if the functions of grasping with the hand or propulsion of the feet are as limited as if the veteran had an amputation and prosthesis, the examiner should check yes and describe the diminishing function. The question simply asks whether the functional loss is to the same degree as if there were an amputation of the affected limb. That definition is not perfect, but it is much better than what we were previously given. Any questions regarding that section?
No,
Mm.
pretty
Okay.
much cut and dry.
So let me read to you what it used to just be, okay? And I want you to try to wrap your head around what this means, because even from a medical standpoint, I don't really understand how they proposed it. So traditionally, this is the only thing that was in the DBQ. Due to the ALS condition, is there functional impairment of an extremity such that no effective function remains other than that which would be equally well served by an amputation with prosthesis? So that's why I would ask, okay, so if we would cut your ankle off, gave you a fake one, would it be better? So I'm glad they added that definition in there. Section 12 on page 11 of 12 asks about financial responsibility. Basically, in the medical examiner's opinion, are they able to manage their benefit payments in their best interest, or at least direct someone else to do so? Section 13 talks about diagnostic testing, pulmonary function test, any imaging. Section 14 talks about functional impact, which is pretty standard in all the DBQs. Section 15 is the remarks, standard in all the DBQs. Section 16 is the examiner's certification and their signature. So examiner's name, title, area of practice, their contact information, their NPI, their medical license, and their state. So again, that's a lengthy DBQ. I didn't touch each question, word for word, but I know that ALS is a devastating disease, and I see the effort and appreciate the effort that the VA is doing. However, I feel like we need to make it consistent for many of the conditions that end up causing the limitations of loss of use, of loss of bowel and bladder control. I think there's a lot more there that we need to address.
You know, the former CMP examiner yourself, I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever done a CMP or for a person with a injury or spinal injury or a paralyzed diaphragm? You ever done one of that?
Not with the I've had like what they call hemiparesis, so it's just one side versus the other, but not on both. But I
No.
know that the pulmonary function testing, it's not good.
No, here's the deal. I mean, what you got to realize that even as a, as an independent medical examiner yourself, you can be forceful in this. Now, if they do an examination and require a pulmonary function test, if the patient's it's already been diagnosed with a paralyzed diaphragm, they need to do the test while the person is laying down, not sitting up.
I've never heard of that. What's the difference?
If you're sitting up, you've got gravity helping you a little bit, and you
Oh,
blow and you'll have a little bit of function. But if you're lying down, that puts you in an actual condition to where you're talking at least a 20 or 30% drop. That's what they need to be rated on, not standing up. It should be laying down. Make sense?
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. But they're going to do in the VA. They're going to do what they want to do. So then they give you a little juice at the end of it when you go in the box, and that little, they hit you with the or the albuterol because they can improve your reading before they get you out the door. No, it's just there's certain things and certain points that that you catch on to over time. Because if you live it, and you know what was done wrong, and you know what needs to be done right. You know.
So I don't know if we've talked about this before, but at least on a recording anyway. But
Hmm.
I feel like to really appreciate where we're at now, you have to understand how this process has progressed. So I'm in the process of writing the history of compensation and pension and the programs that have been built for our veterans, starting way from the very beginning. Um, it is interesting to see, how the government has appreciated the injuries associated with war. Um,
Hmm.
and I think, you know, the history will talk about, the economy at that time and what the income was like at that time, what kind of compensation was given, what was considered. And it was really prompted because I came across a legal advertisement for an attorney group out of Cleveland from the 1800s. And it outlined how much veterans would get if they lost a horse during the war, or if they had other, an amputation, like the $6 that they would get a month for having an amputation. So I think it'll be interesting for those that enjoy history and kind of want to understand, how we've gotten to where we're at and the direction we're heading. And I'm hoping to have, it's going to be about 200, 300 pages. Hopefully having it done in August. So it'll be a
Yeah,
good
I'll
read.
be interested in that. Were you aware that back during the Civil War, if an attorney represented you before the VA, the maximum he could charge was $20 of your back pay?
I did not know that. I haven't,
Yeah.
it's not even, honestly, it's not even in that advertisement. I'll have to go through it. It's got the old paper stench, and so I have to delicately like flip those pages.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
That's a bad stench. Kind of reminds me of driving down through I-40 in Tennessee, in between Knoxville and Chattanooga. They got a bunch of paper mills, and the whole damn place smells. Let it rain.
Yeah.
You
Well,
don't
as you go
there.
across the Owasso River,
Oh
know
yeah,
exactly where
that
you're
whole.
talking
Oh
about.
my God, you got to roll your windows up and put it on research because you do not want to smell that stuff. If you ever go down 75 going toward Florida, Bethany, driving that way, when you get there, make sure you got your windows up.
what's crazy? You say that, and I drive to Chillicothe, which is 23 minutes up the road, almost every day, and they have Mead paper mill. It's not Mead now, but the paper mill has ran Chillicothe for the last 50 years. So it is on a cloudy day, that smell is, it burns.
It make you sick to your stomach.
Well, right there beside that paper mill, like you said, on a cloudy day, it's been several years ago now, probably 25 years ago. The worst automobile collisions took place right there in that area.
Yeah,
Foggy
fog.
day,
Hmm.
and there was 128 car pileup, and I think 33 or 34 people lost their life.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hear about that. I've been stuck in traffic in that. I mean, we used to go down to Georgia because Michael was shooting TV shows and stuff, and we had to go from here to Georgia several times. And I got stuck in that one. It's raining and bad wreck, and sit there for about 3 hours and that crap.
Yeah,
Wow.
they actually have gates up to shut the interstate.
Hmm. Oh, they got signs, big flashing signs up too, and it tells you, certain at a
Oh
certain
yeah,
time. Uh,
fog
that's why
is
you need
present, and
that's why
it's always been bad.
these new vehicles are handy now because they got the front radar, you know, that will save your life
Yeah.
because radar will cut through that fog, but nothing else will. You can't see much, but the radar was, if the car stops in front of you, your car is going to stop you. And when it does stop, you get off the road as fast as you can because the guy behind you might be a tractor trailer and not have radar.
Yeah. If I transition back to that
But
whole proposal for neurologic conditions, there was over, and I was impressed with the number of comments that were submitted. I was trying to pull it up before we got on here. I can't find it now, but there was over 50 comments from people about the proposed changes, and all but one opposed the changes because they did not feel that it was going to benefit the veteran. And the one comment that gave the proposed changes a complete stamp of approval was one of the largest advocacy groups in our country. And I am disappointed. So I'm not going to say who they are, but
You got to realize the guy that probably wrote it was probably sitting at his computer at the bar. He probably had 7 or 8 already.
I
It's
don't
not the
know.
Legion,
I'd
Ray.
like to, not the Legion, but I'll tell you, I would like to think that they before they wrote that letter, not only were they at the bar, but they also took some gummies and maybe got a TBI from the veteran outside kicking his arse because he wasn't mentally advocating for the veteran in that scenario. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm actually
there's a reason.
surprised we haven't.
Can I give you some advice as to get their, go ahead and go on their websites and look at these organizations and start reading their bylaws and look where their true allegiance actually lies within. Then then your eyes will open and you'll be enlightened to a new universe.
Our small town supports this major um, advocacy group, and
Have you got,
these small
have you got
towns,
have you got that post and a Legion post in the same town?
yeah, and just down the street.
Do the sheriffs
So,
come
but
by and raid each other because they accuse each other of bootlegging? It happened a lot in Eastern Kentucky.
oh
Well,
goodness,
heaven's light in Tennessee too. I mean, now you said the largest group. If I remember
not
correctly, okay, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I remember correctly, the numbers that I've seen, if you're talking about largest membership, the American Legion is the largest membership. And I disagree with a lot of our bylaws. And I argue with them. I mean, with this show, along with my show, I get a lot of attention from our state commander, and my national commander has come and visited me personally to be on the show. And I have no problem challenging them and telling them how wrong they are.
It
And the
is
only
not the
reason,
American Legion.
okay.
It's not the largest, but it is a large.
Okay, so it's the second largest. So I know who you're talking about now, and that
Mm.
goes along with what he says about the bar. So I can relate with that one too. But
It's a private club.
yeah, a private organization,
Private
private
club. They
military
call
organization,
it. Mhm.
and the kind of interesting thing when they go to all three of them, all three of your majors, when they go to Congress and talk about how many votes they have to get changes like this made, they don't tell Congress that they hadn't cleaned up their death row in 7 years. And they're still counting guys that have been dead for 5 to 7 years on their roll. And they're not very quick to take them off. I've experienced that taking 2 or 3 years, and widows calling me saying, "Would you please tell them to quit sending my husband mail? He's been dead for 2 years." You know,
I bet you still voted.
is he from Johnson County down in Texas? Uh,
Johnson County, the famous county, no matter what state you're in.
yeah.
Hmm.
Now
No,
we'll get a bunch of calls from some of these guys from Texas now, since I made that comment.
no, yeah, I doubt it. You might, but don't worry. I got you back. We'll send some Kentucky boys down there. You used to send a bunch of boys to Texas, but after the Alamo, they quit doing that. Mm, 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 mm. No. What's your take on it, Bethany? What do you think? I mean, if these changes go through, there's going to be a lot of veterans screwed.
Yeah, big time, big time. Um, maybe, as we, I don't know the best way to really kind of incorporate the letter and some of the things that we discussed and how I followed up with those in my request. But I think the biggest deficit or harm to the veteran is going to come to these peripheral neuropathies that they're proposing to change.
Yes.
We have a DBQ. I was actually trying to look up, the order of the DBQ, so then that way I could kind of talk about the game plan. But I know they're coming up probably towards the end of the year. But I think that's actually the biggest change that's proposed that's going to negatively impact the veterans is the peripheral neuropathy.
My best advice, vets, if you're listening or watching the show, if you've got a claim, uh, even an initial claim for any neurological condition, either it's radiculopathy or whatever, based on a neck injury or diabetes, diabetic neuropathy, I would strongly recommend you go ahead and get this claim in now before any change takes effect, because you can be rated on today's criteria because there's a cutoff date when it happens. If it happens, of course, don't ever be reactive. Always be proactive and get it in, because if they make changes like this, it's going to screw the pooch one of these days. Because the vascular ones really got me. You know, the changes. The same guy wrote it.
Mm.
Mm.
Looking at the neurological conditions order, the next one is going to be central nervous system and neuromuscular diseases, which is like not specifically multiple sclerosis, but similar. Maybe we can combine those two, or the next two. But then it's cranial nerves, and then diabetic peripheral neuropathy, then fibromyalgia. So we're not peripheral nerves don't come until almost the last one. So I don't know. Maybe we don't have to go in order. We can kind of combine and move things around. But um, if you want, John, we could jump to that one next. So that way I can get content ready.
Yeah, we could do peripheral neuropathy next. It'll be fine. I have no problem with that, because I think mainly that's probably going to be your biggest hitter when it comes to VA disability, because diabetes and injuries. I mean, it's still the same, isn't it? Peripheral nerves.
Let's do that then.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Well, we got 3 minutes left. Bethany, give everybody your email address and how to contact you if they want to contact Valor for Vetting and utilize your all's wonderful services.
So our website is www.valor the number 4 vet.com. That's Valor VALOR the number 4 vet.com. Our phone number is 888-448-1011. We're looking out for a few things on our website that is coming as a change. We're slowly trying to add all the diagnostic codes, kind of like similar to Military Disability Made Easy, but we're focusing mainly on more of the medical aspect, where I'm a physician assistant and patient education when it comes to diseases is really my passion. So we're going to be adding a lot of those articles, and veterans can look uh, the each blog post up by their diagnostic code and learn stuff about secondary conditions, prognosis, things like that. So big things coming in 2025. I'm looking forward to it. The book, like I mentioned, we're going to be putting out an interest list where people can sign up if they're interested, and at the book's release we'll send out an email if they're interested in picking up a copy. Yeah, give us a call. We have disabled veterans on our team, and so they love to talk just as much as you do. So give us a call.
Okay, guys, we do appreciate everybody watching, and we'll do this again next week. This is John Stacy. I am the owner of the Exposed Vet Production Group now, I guess we'll call it. And thanks to Bethany Spangenberg coming on and being our guest. And she'll do it again next month. She's a monthly guest. And we work hand in hand with Valor for Vet. And I want to thank Mr. Ray Cobb down in Tennessee. How you doing, Ray? Thank
I'm
you for
doing
coming on,
great.
buddy, and sitting with us. And with that, we'll be signing off for now.
Thank you.